Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. First came the Grenfell tragedy, then the realisation that thousands of other buildings around the country had similar flammable cladding. A new fire safety law comes into force today, but campaigners argue it does nothing to help leaseholders whose homes have dangerous cladding and are having to bear the huge cost of removing it from properties they bought in good faith. The government has set up a £5 billion fund to help pay towards the costs, but only for the tallest buildings. Others are now being offered loans. Tonight, Home Secretary Priti Patel says the new law will make properties safer in the future. Our business correspondent Sarah Corker reports.
Who should pay to fix Britain's broken buildings? From London to Leeds, Merseyside to Manchester, thousands of leaseholders are facing huge bills to remove dangerous cladding and to fix other fire safety faults.
I have spent days and weeks crying about it, worrying about our future.
In Manchester, this was Rachel and her partner's first home together. Now they feel trapped.
Declaring bankruptcy at this age, what does that do to us for our future? It decimates it. So, it's terrifying.
And these are real discussions about bankruptcy that you're having now.
Yes. Yeah, obviously it's not the wisest thing to do, but we've sat there at night and had conversations. What would it mean?
The fire safety bill was introduced to strengthen building regulations following the Grenfell tragedy. Peers in the Lords and some Conservative backbench MPs tried to make changes to the bill to protect flat owners from cladding costs. But those attempts failed and the bill became law today.
The fire safety bill, which has received royal assent, will actually help to save lives by changing some of these awful regulations and guidelines that existed previously, and this will help to save lives.
And the Prime Minister previously made this pledge.
We're determined that no leaseholder should have to pay for the unaffordable costs of fixing safety defects that they didn't cause under no fault of their own.
But today, cladding campaigners say they feel betrayed.
It is an unbelievable situation, and I think a lot of people don't actually believe what's going on and don't believe this could be happening in the UK and that the government won't step in to protect us.
Views echoed by some backbench Tory MPs.
It's shameful what the government's done. I'm shocked, I'm astonished, and you can tell I'm upset about it. We've fought, we've done everything we possibly can.
The government has allocated £5 billion for the removal of dangerous cladding on the highest risk blocks, and there are also plans for a low-interest loan scheme for smaller buildings. But ministers have also repeatedly said that building owners have a responsibility to make sure their buildings are safe. But this isn't just a problem about cladding. There is currently no funding to cover the costs of fixing other types of fire safety faults, and across Britain, flat owners are facing tough choices about their futures. At the heart of this debate is the question of who should pay to fix these buildings. Is it the leaseholders, the building owners, the developers, the government? And what started as a problem with cladding has become a much wider building safety crisis. Safety inspections in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire exposed not just problems with cladding but other fire safety defects, defective insulation, flammable balconies, missing fire breaks. And the government said today that it has been clear throughout that building owners and the wider industry should make buildings safe without passing on those costs to leaseholders. It also said it felt the government's approach strikes the right balance in protecting leaseholders and also being fair to taxpayers.
Sarah, thank you very much. It's the political row that just won't go away. Boris Johnson insisted today there is nothing to see or worry about after the electoral watchdog launched an investigation into the renovation of his Downing Street flat. That's not Labour's view. Sir Keir Starmer says the lack of clarity over who paid and when is farcical. There are now 3 investigations into the matter. Here's our political correspondent, Chris Mason.
The apparently simple can sometimes take a while to work out. Boris Johnson was asked again today about his Downing Street flat and who initially paid for its makeover. He was repeatedly dismissive of what he described as a farrago of nonsense.
I don't think there's anything to see here or to worry about. I don't think that this is the number one issue for the people of our country. Indeed, by several orders of magnitude.
The Prime Minister insists he paid what he owed for sprucing up the living quarters here and will declare what he needs to. But he won't say if he borrowed the money, and if so, from whom. And all of this is meant to be published. The matter is keeping a lot of people busy. Earlier this week, the country's top civil servant, Simon Case, told MPs he was conducting a review at the request of the Prime Minister into how the refurb was paid for. The Electoral Commission, which regulates the money spent in politics, has launched a formal investigation saying there were reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. It has the power to issue fines or refer matters to the police. And it's the first big job for Lord Geidt, newly appointed as the independent adviser on ministers' interests. He'll examine if the Prime Minister has received any donations he's required to declare. 3 separate inquiries into how the facelift of the famous flat was funded.
I think this is getting a bit farcical. I think the Prime Minister could actually deal with this very, very quickly. All he's got to do is answer a very simple question, which is who paid initially for the redecoration of your flat?
And to furnish his point somewhat, Sir Keir decided to pay a visit to a home improvement shop today. Playing political games, claimed the Conservatives. Lord Geidt, the new independent adviser on ministers' interests, spent 10 years working for the Queen. Labour say he should have more power, such as being able to launch his own investigations and not just do ones asked for by the Prime Minister. He will publish his findings into Boris Johnson, but Mr Johnson has refused to say if he'll abide by those conclusions. There now could be a 4th investigation into what's going on. Labour MPs have asked the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards to look into it. There is every prospect there are more revelations to come. Chris Mason, BBC News in Downing Street.
Latest vaccination figures for England show that 70% of 45 to 49-year-olds have had their first dose. It comes as COVID infection rates drop to their lowest weekly figure since the beginning of September last year. Today, Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who is 42, received his first jab. Our health editor Hugh Pym reports now on the continued attempts to reach communities where the take-up is still low. His report does contain some flashing images.
Waiting to get on the bus, one with a difference. This is a vaccine bus being used by the London Borough of Brent. No prior booking is needed, people can walk up. Some are notified by text when the bus has arrived. Their details, like age, are then checked by officials.
Sort of as dropped as it gets. Good.
And they get their jabs.
Text message came through this morning. It was just around the corner and brilliant, you know, it happened to work with my working day. So I could do it.
I came to see my friends here at the building. I saw this car waiting and they offered me for the vaccination.
I just decided to come in here and do it. West is my area, so I don't have much trouble.
The council, working with local health teams, is using the bus to get to areas where take-up of the vaccines is known to be relatively low. It's also a way of being seen in local communities and answering people's questions.
Some people come with the bus, they see the bus today, they may ask some questions to my colleagues who will give them lots of help and support on health matters, mental health, lots of other issues. But they may come back tomorrow, and we're noticing that people will come back next week and not only bring themselves, bring their colleagues. And that builds long-lasting trust. It's more than just a vaccine.
Looking across the UK, 72% of adults in Wales have had a first dose of the vaccine. In England, it's 64%, and the same in Northern Ireland. In Scotland, it's 63% of adults. One of the key players in the vaccine programme, Sir Simon Stevens, head of NHS England, has announced he'll leave at the end of July. That happens to be the date when the government says all adults in the UK will have been offered a first dose. Sir Simon had originally wanted to leave earlier, but stayed on to lead NHS England through the pandemic and vaccine rollout. His counterpart at the Department of Health was also getting a first dose, Matt Hancock receiving the jab from Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jonathan Van Tam.
Absolutely fine. Can barely feel it.
Mr Hancock is 42, the lowest age for jabs among the general public in England.
Fantastic.
It won't be long before those a few years younger will be offered a first dose.
Just like the Queen said, barely a scratch.
Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Now let's take a look at some more government figures on coronavirus, which show there were just under 2,500 new infections in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 2,259 new cases per day in the last week. There are 1,553 people in hospital with the coronavirus. 22 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours. That's people who'd had a positive COVID-19 test within the previous 28 days. The average number of deaths per day in the past week is also 22. The total number of UK deaths is now 127,502. On vaccinations, a total of more than 34 million people have now had their first jab, and the number who've had their second jab is more than 14 million. The jailed Russian opposition activist Alexei Navalny has made his first public appearance since going on a hunger strike, which he has recently abandoned. Looking gaunt, Mr Navalny was appealing against his conviction in a separate case. His appearance comes amid a new Kremlin-inspired push against his anti-corruption organisation. Our Moscow correspondent, Sarah Rainsford, has the details.
His head close-shaven and face gaunt. This is the first glimpse of Alexei Navalny since his 3-week hunger strike. The opposition politician transformed as a prisoner. This video link to court is now his only platform. The one official camera won't film his speech, but audio does get out. And today, Navalny denounced Vladimir Putin as a president whose only care is clinging to power eternally. But since Navalny's arrest, the pressure on his supporters has intensified. Irina used to run his office in St. Petersburg. They've cleared out because the prosecutor now wants the whole Navalny network banned as extremists.
The risks are high because we just don't know how this law will be applied, how hard they want to crack down. Destroying our movement is already a huge thing. But they can still come after whoever they want. And that's frightening.
Well, the door here is shuttered, the office is empty. It's as if Alexei Navalny's team were never even here. And it's the same story now right across this country. As a whole opposition movement, the most prominent, the most organised in Russia, has suddenly vanished from sight. Last August, Alexei Navalny nearly died on a flight from Siberia, poisoned with a nerve agent. When he recovered and returned to Russia defiant, he was arrested on arrival. Since then, his offices have been raided constantly, team members targeted with searches and arrests. Despite everything, crowds took to the streets throughout Russia once again last week, demanding Navalny's release. But the price of such dissent is rising all the time. This is the man the Kremlin wants silenced and forgotten. And any attempt to challenge that is obliterated. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, St. Petersburg.
And the time is 6:15. Our top story this evening. Anger from cladding campaigners. They say the new fire safety law doesn't help leaseholders left with massive bills. And still to come, the gene therapy giving hope to patients with a rare eye condition. During the presidential campaign last year, Joe Biden had to endure the Sleepy Joe jibes from his opponents. Now, 100 days into his presidency, a very different man is emerging. His legislative plans could mark him out as one of the most transformative presidents in modern history. In a speech last night, Mr. Biden called for a once-in-a-generation investment plan. It's costly, $4 trillion, and he wants tax hikes to pay for it. The American Families Plan aims to cut child poverty and put a cap on childcare costs. He wants to create millions of jobs through a massive programme of investment in infrastructure projects such as broadband and green energy. And he plans to address those two controversial issues, police reform and gun control. But his plans face a battle in Congress, especially over higher taxes. Our North America editor, John Sopel, reports.
The President of the United States.
Those alleys looked at...
Because of COVID and social
strange on
distancing, the audience was much smaller. But the pandemic has given Joe Biden the space to come up with a set of radical proposals that are a break with 40 years of economic orthodoxy. Big government, tax and spend are back. But one thing is totally new.
Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, no president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words, and it's about time.
A lot of people thought the 78-year-old would be a transitional president. Wrong. He's set on transformation, with his plans for European-style welfare policies, a green agenda, and the thing he kept on repeating last night, creating new jobs.
That's why I proposed the American Jobs Plan, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself. This is the largest jobs plan since World War II.
A lot of those jobs will be found in the construction industry. He wants to spend $2.4 trillion on a rebuild of America's motorways, airports and railways.
There can be no argument that America's crumbling infrastructure is in urgent need of repair. But Joe Biden's ambition goes well beyond roads and bridges. It's about welfare, it's about the role of the state. But Republicans say he's more interested in social engineering than civil engineering.
And in Congress, he spelt out who was going to have to foot the bill. Those earning under $400,000 a year would be untouched, but the wealthiest would see their taxes rise.
But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share. I think you should be able to become a billionaire and a millionaire, but pay your fair share.
This is the first major set piece in Congress since the January the 6th riots. But the president wanted to turn a page, exhorting Americans to come together.
Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There's not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity.
Joe Biden also made a plea with lawmakers to work together to get things done. Let's agree on what we can, he told them. Fine words, but in divided America, they're likely to fall on deaf ears. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
Here, a judge has said the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, must provide more information to a campaign group that's taking him to court over PPE contracts awarded during the pandemic. The Good Law Project, which has taken action against Mr Hancock, said it was unable to fairly mount a challenge because critical information had not been disclosed by the government. The government disputes that and the case as a whole. New data released this afternoon by the Environment Agency has shown that excess levels of hydrogen sulphide are still being released from a landfill site in Staffordshire. Although Public Health England says it's unlikely to cause long-term health problems, it's making life a misery for people who live nearby. Phil Mackey reports.
This is Wally's Quarry in Silverdale. It's used as a landfill site, and here's the problem. It's right next door to hundreds of homes and is giving off a terrible smell. Since it was allowed to increase the amount of waste it takes, the stink has got worse, and if you're downwind, it's horrible.
We obviously knew there was a landfill there when we moved in. The smell gets trapped in the house, and it gets trapped in your hair, and your clothing, your carpets, and your cars, and your children's toys and things like that all smell of landfill. And it ranges from sort of a rotten egg sort of smell to a chemically acrid smell as well, and that's quite foul.
Today shouldn't be so bad because it's sunny and warm, and that should get rid of the hydrogen sulphide smell. That creates that rotten eggs, stink bomb odour that's really unpleasant. But honestly, standing just across the road from it at the moment, oh, it's really unpleasant, and actually it's making me feel quite ill.
There were more than 5,000 complaints last month and over 2,000 just last week. But there's been a big impact on mental health.
It depresses you. It's the day and week on week attrition of living with it randomly that's really getting people down.
The site's being closely monitored by the Environment Agency, which has ordered that improvements are made by the end of this week. The operator, Red Industries, has said that it was acutely aware of the community's concerns and is capping an extensive area of the site. A few miles away, it's made learning very difficult for children like Ruby, Poppy and Ben.
You can't work and your mind's just sat onto the landfill.
It makes me feel sick. I have headaches all the time. It puts me off my work.
It won't go away. Like, no matter how many air fresheners you'll get, it won't go.
Stop the stink!
Hundreds joined another protest this week demanding that something's done to stop the Silverdale stink from overpowering the whole area. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Newcastle-under-Lyme.
Party leaders in Wales will face each other in a 90-minute television debate this evening, with a week to go to the Senate election. The pandemic has cast a shadow over the campaigning so far. Our Wales correspondent Howell Griffith reports.
Hey, thanks for the support, Derek.
Connecting with voters, pressing the flesh. The usual campaign choreography has been constrained by the pandemic. The party leaders all say they can help Wales recover, but they'll also need to tackle deep-rooted problems of poverty and poor health. Labour, led by Mark Drakeford, has been in power in Wales for over 2 decades. He says they deserve more time.
You're never going to tackle it over a short period. And
22 years isn't enough?
22 years is certainly not enough. There are health inequalities in England, and they've had a parliament since 1215.
So
I never hear anybody saying to them...
Will you solve anything in 5 years?
I never hear anybody saying to them, what's the point of having you? You haven't solved it in 1,000 years.
Plaid Cymru argue independence would deliver change. It has governed with Labour in coalition in the past. Their leaders keen to sidestep questions of doing another deal. What about a confidence and supply
Well,
deal?
I think that we...
Be nice and clear so voters know what they're voting for.
Yeah, well, no, we're absolutely clear that we're aiming to win this election. I've said that we wouldn't want to be a junior partner. I've taken that option off the table, and also, of course, there's no circumstances whatsoever that we would enter into coalition with the Conservatives.
For their part, the Welsh Tories will have been cheered by gains in the 2019 general election. But are the Prime Minister's current problems becoming a distraction?
I was with the Prime Minister in North Wales on Monday. The Prime Minister obviously clearly denies any of the allegations that are levied against him. And ultimately what I'm focused on is making sure that the voters know that in the Welsh Conservatives they have an ambitious party that will stand up for Wales at every opportunity with an agenda that will unlock Wales's potential.
For the Lib Dems, next week's vote is about trying to grow again. Their only Senedd member is standing down, and they have no Welsh MPs.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that the last year or so hasn't been disappointing for the Welsh Liberal Democrats. Of course it has, and we'd have wanted to have done better. But right now we're standing a full slate of candidates across Wales, both in the regions and in the constituencies. We're working hard. We're talking to people about our message about put recovery first, the economy, mental health and the planet.
After a year of keeping our distance, the parties hope voters are ready to re-engage and will want to hear what the leaders have to offer. Hywel Griffith, BBC News.
And viewers in Wales can watch the leaders' debate on BBC One at 8:30, and elsewhere you can see it at the same time on the BBC's News channel. Patients with a rare inherited eye condition which causes gradual loss of sight have said they're astonished and delighted by the success of a new form of gene therapy. The treatment is intended to halt further loss of sight, but has actually improved their vision. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh has more, and just a warning, his report includes images of an operation.
Look up.
Jake has been gradually losing his sight since birth, but no longer thanks to a groundbreaking gene therapy.
Just being able to see facial features on my own face is something that I never used to be able to do.
Jake, from County Durham, has a rare inherited condition, which means his central vision is largely a blur. Since his right eye was treated a year ago, his peripheral vision has improved.
I'm in the best place I've probably been in 24 years of life. Last year, for a lot of people, was a dark and miserable year, but for me it was probably easily the best year of my life.
After a year's delay due to COVID, Jake has now had his other eye treated at Moorfields Eye Hospital in London.
which it's hoped may further stabilise and perhaps improve his vision. The one-off gene therapy called Lux-Turna is delivered via injection. It costs £600,000, but the NHS has agreed a discounted price with the manufacturer Novartis. The injection delivers working copies of a faulty gene, RPE65, into the retina at the back of the eye. The DNA is encased in a harmless virus which breaks into the retinal cells. Once inside the nucleus, the replacement gene kickstarts production of the RPE65 protein, essential for healthy vision.
This is really transformational. It provides an opportunity, provides hope for people, not only with this specific condition, but people with other similar conditions, hope that they can protect their sight in the long term.
I keep noticing subtle improvements. I noticed one today coming into this park. I noticed that there are railings above the entrance to the gate.
Matthew from London has the same rare inherited condition and has had one eye treated. The second operation is next month. Age 48, his vision had already deteriorated much further than Jake's.
I lost my central vision about 10 years ago, and that had a really severe impact on how I live and who I am. If the treatment means that if it puts off another decline like that, then that's going to be amazing.
Matthew's wife has noticed he is more independent.
He doesn't have to ask me every little thing. Is this on the right setting? Is that, you know, the washing machine, the coffee machine, you know, those things that are just everyday people take for granted, Matthew can now do himself.
Around a dozen people in the UK have received the gene therapy, including several children, who stand to benefit most as it may halt their sight loss before permanent damage is done. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Now, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are celebrating their 10th wedding anniversary, and to mark the occasion, they've released this glossy video showing the family at play. They tweeted that they were enormously grateful for the support they'd received over the last decade. And that's all from the BBC's News at 6, so it's goodbye from me, and on BBC One we can now join the BBC's news teams where you are.